In today's video, we explore the legend of El Silbon, the ghostly figure with a haunting whistle that brings only and only fear. Stay tuned for this chilling tale story. In 1980, in a very beautiful village in South America called Los Llanos, where there is greenery and fields all around. Near one of those fields, a boy named Di Maso was staying at his uncle's house on vacation. People used to go to bed early in those days, so everyone had dinner early and went to bed. Di Maso lay down on the bed but couldn't sleep. He was just looking at the fan when suddenly he heard a very loud noise of animals mourning. He got up and went outside and saw that the sound was coming from an animal shelter nearby where there were many cows. Dimaso looked up at the sky and saw that the whole sky was covered with black clouds. He thought that perhaps all the cows were scared of the coming storm, so he went to take them inside the barn and started taking the cows inside the barn one by one with great difficulties. But Dimaso had never seen the cows so restless. Because of so much restlessness, it was becoming difficult for Dimaso to take them away from there. It also started raining heavily. With great difficulty, when he had sent some of the many cows inside the barn, he started getting a very bad smell of meat. As he was sending more cows inside one by one, and the cows were decreasing from there, the smell was increasing. When only 5 or 6 cows were left, he saw that there was blood soaked bones of an old cow lying there. Seeing this, Dimaso froze there and started shouting loudly. But before he could run away from there or do something, he heard a voice from afar. Amidst the heavy rain, that voice coming from miles away was so terrible that Dimaso's soul trembled, and as soon as he heard it, Dimaso understood that he was going to die today because that voice was the whistle of El Silbon, which meant that El Silbon was coming to him. De Maso had heard many stories of El Silbon when he was child. He remembered how in his childhood his relatives used to tell the story of a man who had encountered El Silbon. According to the story of his relatives, that man was also going to a function late at night on his horse from a similar field when the horse's foot slipped on something in that big deserted field. When the man got down and saw there was a deer's bone lying there, from which he eaten meat was still hanging. Before the horseman could understand anything, he heard a soul piercing whistle from afar. He tried to lift his horse, but it was too late for him. He heard the sound of something big jumping on a tree just a short distance away from him. The horseman wanted to run away from there, but then a bone hit him so hard on his head, causing his head to burst. The horseman started screaming for help, but It was of no use because a terrible man of 19 feet was standing in front of him as the face of death, with a hat on his head, but his body and face like some doom. The horseman had never seen such a terrible creature. He had a bag full of bones, and taking out the bones from the same bag, he started killing the horseman without stopping. The horseman kept begging for his life, but that man started taking out the bones from his body and eating them. The next morning, some villagers found not the horseman but his dead body while grazing the cows, which had become a skeleton. It is said that the 19 feet tall it is said that the 19 feet tall skeleton like man is El Silbon, and he still roams in that area. Demaso was thinking about this story, and before he could run away, suddenly a long shadow of 19 feet was formed on the ground, and then a man even taller than that shadow came out, who was wearing a straw hat and from whose body, cut from everywhere, his flesh was hanging. This man, bigger than 19 feet, was none other than El Silbon. That man started walking towards him. The sound of bones colliding was getting louder from the bag laden on his back, from which blood was dripping, and even louder than that was Demaso's heartbeat. To save him, Demaso ran away from there, and he felt that Elsilban was climbing on the trees and jumping from one tree to another, chasing him. Demaso kept shouting, but Elsilban stood right in front of him. He stretched out his terrible long hands, on which his own cut flesh was hanging, trying to kill him when suddenly the sound of a dog barking came, hearing which Lasselbone suddenly trembled with fear and disappeared somewhere in the air. When Demaso saw his pet dog was barking there, and who had probably come there after hearing Demaso's screams, Demaso himself believed that if his dog had not been there that day, Demaso bones would have been in that bag hanging on El Selburn's back. After that night, Demaso kept thinking about El Selban. He asked his relatives and other people living nearby about the story of El Selban. Then what they told him was even more frightening than what had happened to him. People told him that the story of El Selban was absolutely true, according to which a spoiled boy used to live in that area in the 18th century with his small family. Since that boy was the only child of that family, his parents and grandfather used to accept everything he said. One day, that boy asked his father to bring deer meat for dinner, after which his father left for hunting with his hunting rifle and bag. When his father didn't return to home for a long time, that boy became very angry. His mother gave that boy a very sharp knife for his protection and asked him to go and find his father in the forest and bring him back. When that boy returned, his father was not with him, but in that bag were pieces of meat and some organs. and bones which he gave to his mother and asked her to cook it, saying it was deer meat. His mother was feeling strange while cooking the contents of the bag, and she started suspecting. So that boy's mother told her fear to the boy's grandfather. After hearing which, his grandfather took that boy outside and tied him to a tree and started beating him loudly with a hunter until that boy told the truth. A truth that was very scary. That boy told that when he found his father in the forest, he was empty handed because he could not hunt deer. That boy got very angry with him, and in that anger, that boy killed him with the knife he had and took out his flesh with the same knife and cut the rest of his body into pieces and filled it in his bag and came home. Hearing this truth, that boy's grandfather started hitting him so hard with the hunter that the flesh of the boy's body started hanging from his body. After that, his grandfather put chilies and alcohol on his wound and opened him from the tree and put the bag full of his father's meat and bones on his shoulder and left his two terrible dogs behind him, leaving him to wander forever. It is said that since that day till today, the soul of that body started wandering in that area in the name of El Silbon. Almost all the people living in that area believe that they have definitely encountered El Silbon once or another, who sits in the trees and whistles in a different way, and whoever roams in the fields late at night. He attacks them like an animal hunter. It is said that he is just afraid of dogs, and that is why people have kept dogs in all the houses in that area. Demaso was saved that night because of his dog. Otherwise, he too would have been a victim of El Silbon today. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more true horror stories.